All right, let's talk about chord inversions in the key of C. So we're looking at the C major chord inversions here. In bluegrass, flat picking style music, you might not actually play every single chord inversion, and in this case, C major chord inversions. But they're good for reference, and they're also good for kind of locating the scale that you want to play in all the way up and down the neck. So when we look at this first chord inversion here, this is by far the most common C major chord inversion, and that's just the open C chord. Okay, and that open C chord, of course, we're playing the 3rd fret A, the 2nd fret D, and then an open G, and then 1st fret B. And of course, you can see that these chord inversions are chords, but they're also arpeggios, right? So each note of the chord, that's what an arpeggio is it's each note of any given chord. So when we look at this first inversion here, the C major, this open C major chord, the arpeggio, or part of the arpeggio, will consist of these notes. And then back down. So you can kind of build your solos around these chord tones, and that's going to make for a more effective solo if you're sticking, really closely to the chord tones. You're going to, the ear is going to recognize that as a more effective solo, as opposed to just picking random notes out of the C major scale. But as long as they're sort of floating around these chord tones, these arpeggios, you're going to have a much more effective solo. So let's take a look at the second chord inversion now. So the very first chord inversion was the C major chord. Now the second C major chord inversion is going to start up on the 3rd fret A string. And we're essentially going to play a bar chord here, but we're not going to bar the entire fret. We're going to start the bar on the 3rd fret A string. We're just focusing on those 4 notes, and we're just trying to keep it simple here. But this is probably the second most common chord inversion, and this is the, what I would call the bar chord, or you might hear it called a bar chord, because what you're actually doing is you're laying your index finger on this 3rd fret, and you're just sort of barring all of these strings minus the low E. So you're barring the A, the D, the G, the B, and the E, the high E. Although you're not playing the high E, you're still barring it just so that you can create the proper amount of pressure on that 3rd fret. Okay, so that's your second C major chord inversion, and that's going to consist of the 3rd fret A, and then the 5th fret D, followed by the 5th fret G, and then the 5th fret B. So you're not only barring here, but you're also barring here. And I find that's just the easiest way to kind of play that chord inversion. And of course, for the second inversion, your arpeggio is going to sound like this. That's just a 4-note arpeggio. And if you're soloing up the neck, let's say you're taking the solo up here to the 3rd fret, but you're in the key of C major, well, you can kind of think of, okay, that second C major chord inversion kind of consists of those notes, so you can kind of solo around those notes, right, in the C major scale. And that's going to give you that real melodic style of soloing, and it's going to sound really, really good. Okay, let's take a look at the 3rd C major chord inversion now. So the 3rd C major chord inversion is going to start on the 8th fret, low E, and then 7th fret A. And then you're going to see there the same notes that we had in the second inversion, which is 5th fret D, 5th fret G, and 5th fret B. Except this time you're going to be playing those with your index finger. Okay, and this is probably, I would say, the least common, or at least in my playing, this is the least common used chord inversion, especially in bluegrass music, but I would say that you might see this more in jazz, this kind of an inversion. But you can see how all of these inversions are connected, right? So we have little pieces out of each chord inversion that are in the next chord inversion, right? So in this case, we have that that 5th fret D, that 5th fret G, and that 5th fret B that we played back here in the second inversion with our ring finger. But here in the third inversion, we're playing those notes with our index finger. And then we're including that C root note here on the low E, on that low E 8th fret. And then we're going to include the 7th fret A, which is the same as this note. So these are all the same notes, they're just on different parts of the register. Okay, and you can actually, use these inversions as starting points for your solos, as I've been saying. So that's your arpeggio for that inversion. See how the arpeggio in the second inversion there is going to include this 7th fret A string in it. All right, so let's take a look at the 4th C major chord inversion now. So the 4th C major chord inversion is going to start on the same root note that we did before, which is the 8th fret low E, except we're going to play another bar chord here way up the neck. And this bar chord is going to be 8th fret low E, and then 10th fret A, followed by 10th fret D, 9th fret G, and then 8th fret B and 8th fret E. Okay, so you can see how I'm barring this with my index finger. I'm barring on this 8th fret. And I'm just kind of holding what would be like an E major chord shape here with my ring finger, my middle finger, and my little finger. And again, you can play an arpeggio out of this chord position as well. And this is a more common chord inversion here, which is this standard major bar chord here, starting on the root note on that low E string with your index finger. And you're going to see this quite a bit in all styles of guitar playing, this chord inversion. Okay, we'll look at this 5th chord inversion now. We're going even further up the neck here. And this, again, this probably isn't used as much, although I actually do use this chord inversion quite a bit, especially when I'm in the key of G. And I use it to almost kind of emulate the sound of a banjo a little bit in the way that I pick this particular chord inversion. But basically the way this works is we're way up on the neck and we're way up on the register too. So we're actually going to start on the 10th fret D string. And then we're going to go up to the 12th fret G, and then the 13th fret B. Okay, so those 3 notes are probably the most accessible to play out of that particular inversion. And those are generally the notes that I tend to play when I'm playing this chord or when I'm kind of soloing around this chord. You can also do kind of a little half-step slide up there. That's something that I do quite a bit. Then there's this 12th fret high E here, which actually is included in this inversion, although I find this chord inversion particularly difficult to play with that high E 12th fret. So I actually just tend to leave that off and just play those 3 notes. But any way that you feel is easiest for you, and if you wanted to include that, you certainly could. It would just increase the level of difficulty a little bit. Okay, and this sixth inversion now is going to bring us back to where we started, right? So we started way down here on this open C chord inversion, and now we're coming way up here, and we're gonna round it out, and we're gonna complete the pattern with this final chord inversion. And again, this is rarely played, although I occasionally do play this chord inversion from time to time, depending on what key I'm in. But in the key of C, you're so far up the neck here. If I didn't have a cutaway, I have this cutaway so I could access these higher notes. If I didn't have that, this would be extremely difficult to play. But nonetheless, this is the inversion. It's the same inversion that we had down here, but because we're at the end of the fretboard here, we're just playing it slightly differently. We're making use of these open strings, whereas all the way up here, we're going to actually include the 12th fret G, the 13th fret B, and the 12th fret high E. So this is going to start on the 15th fret on the A string. And you can see how we're making that same C shape here, but we're just doing it a little bit differently. Okay, so again, you can use this as sort of a reference point for your soloing, you know, for your arpeggios, so you can kind of, you know, get a sense of where you're at and what scale you should use if you're way up the neck like this. And again, this is a kind of not a super commonly used chord inversion, although you could use it, and I do use it from time to time when I'm in different keys. But because we're in the key of C, it's going to be way up here on the 15th fret. And this is, again, this is the same chord inversion as this open C. They're the same notes, they're just higher up on the register. Okay, so hopefully you can see how, you know, all of these inversions are connected. And basically they're the same chord, they're a C major chord, but they're being played in 6 different positions on the neck. So these are the only positions that you can play these chords in. And they're all connected in a sort of a long pattern going up the register. So let's play these chord inversions together now, so you can kind of see how they're all connected. And we'll start with this first open C chord inversion. And we're just going to play the first 4 notes of each chord inversion. So you can see how they're actually the same notes, but just different chord positions going all the way up the neck.